So you've got $10,000 sitting in your bank account, earning a little bit of interest, but basically nothing, and you know that you should invest it. But every time you start researching, you get completely overwhelmed by all of the different options. There's index funds, individual stocks, real estate, crypto, high yield savings. Where do you even start? So picture this, you are someone that's been saving for 2 years, you finally hit your $10,000 goal, and you're so afraid of making the wrong choice that you end up not doing anything for 6 months. And during those 6 months, inflation is still eating at your money and your purchasing power. If you're new here, my name is Alice. I am a former finance and tech girl. And on this channel, I help people with making, saving, and investing money. And I'm going to break down the 5 best ways to invest $10,000 in 2025. Here's the thing though, the best option isn't the same for everyone. It really depends on your age, your goals, your risk tolerance, and your timeline. So I'm going to show you exactly how to choose the right strategy for your current situation, plus the one mistake that you're currently making that could cost you thousands of dollars. The Emergency Fund Foundation. But before I show you any investment strategies, there's something that 90% of people get wrong when they have $10,000 to invest. And if you skip this step, it could force you to sell your investments at the worst possible time. So here's the truth. If this $10,000 that you're thinking of investing, if that's all the money that you have, you shouldn't invest all of it. I know that that's not what you want to hear necessarily, but hear me out. First, you need some sort of emergency fund or some amount of money that is liquid and easily accessible and available to you. This is why. 57% of Americans cannot afford a $1,000 emergency. And the average emergency, whether it's somebody getting sick, going to the hospital, having to take your pet to the vet, your car breaks down, the average emergency costs between $3,500 to $5,000. And if you invested all of your cash and you need cash for an emergency, then you might have to sell at a loss, which is what we don't want to do. So the rule of thumb is having at least 3 to 6 months of expenses in a high yield savings account that at today's rate is earning between 3 and 4% APY. Make sure you check out my video up top there where I talk about the best high yield savings accounts in 2025. They're all FDIC insured accounts. I rank them in this video up there. Make sure you check it out. But if you have $10,000 to invest, here's how I would help you think about it. The first scenario is if you don't have an emergency fund, you may want to consider splitting this up into half. So $5,000 into a high yield savings account, emergency fund, and then $5,000 to invest. The second scenario is if you already have some sort of emergency fund or just some cash savings available, then you want to top off your emergency fund to 3 months expenses and then invest the rest. So if your monthly expense number is $2,000, then you want to have at least $6,000 of cash set aside. Then you can invest the remaining $4,000. And then the third scenario is if you already have an emergency fund already, then you want to invest the entire $10,000, and this is basically where the fund begins. The key insight here is that you can't build wealth if you are constantly having to raid your investments for emergencies, and you can't build wealth until you've kind of established that baseline security of being able to cover emergencies and your day-to-day expenses. You know, there are people who make good investment decisions out there, but they hurt themselves or they hurt their returns because they have to sell at a bad time. Maybe they panic and sell during a market downturn to have to pay for an unexpected expense. And we don't want to be that person. We want to have a longer term mindset and mentality when it comes to investing, because it's better to be boring than to be broke. Now we're going to talk about the set it and forget it index fund strategy. Now, this is a strategy that's actually created a lot of millionaires, more than any other investment approach. And it's really, really simple. There are a lot of people who overcomplicate investing and they spend a lot of hours and their time trying to beat this basic index fund investing approach. And what index fund investing is just putting $10,000 into something like a total stock market fund or a target date fund. And this is why I would recommend this for most people, because the S&P 500, if you look at it historically over a long period of time and have a long-term mindset, not a day-to-day mindset, the S&P 500 has averaged 10% annual returns over the past 90 years. $10,000 invested today could be worth $67,000 in 20 years. And you get instant diversification across hundreds or thousands of companies, and there are ultra low fees. We're talking like between 0.03 to 0.2% for passively managed funds and 1 to 2% for actively managed funds. So there are a couple options here you can consider. Vanguard Total Stock Market Fund, VTSAX, has a 0.04% fee, or a very similar equivalent, which is VTI, Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund, ETF. The Fidelity equivalent is FZROX, or Fidelity Zero Total Market, which has a 0% fee. So this is how you could do it. Open up a Roth IRA at Fidelity, which is tax-free growth for you. Invest that money into something like FZROX, set up automatic monthly investments of $200, and then you ignore for the next 20 or 30 years. This is why it works. You don't need to pick individual stocks. You don't need to do a ton of research to just try to beat what these funds can already do. You don't need to time the market, and you don't need to constantly monitor and adjust. Really, just investing in something like this historically can beat a ton of professional fund managers. And this is actually the strategy that Warren Buffett, the world's best investor, recommends for regular investors. It's not as sexy, it's not as exciting, but it works, and it works for good reason. I would say that the people who build wealth with index funds, they end up sleeping better at night than those who are trying to get rich chasing individual stocks. Another strategy is using REITs. Now, if you want real estate exposure without needing a down payment or the hassle of being a landlord, there is a way to invest in real estate with just $10,000. And it's extremely accessible. It might actually surprise you how accessible it is. What it is called Real Estate Investment Trust, or REITs. REITs allow you to own a piece of commercial real estate without buying property directly, because they're basically real estate professionals that after they've raised all of this money, they will use that money to go then buy commercial real estate, malls, shopping centers, industrial complexes, and they're basically responsible for being the landlords and generating an ROI on each property. And so some of the benefits of investing in REITs is professional management, diversification across hundreds of properties. As a solo real estate investor, especially as a beginner, you probably only have access to, single family homes or single family units. But with these REITs, because they've pooled so much capital, they have the ability to buy all sorts of real estate that the average person doesn't have access to. Once these REITs generate cash flow from their properties, they also may distribute them back out to their shareholders in the form of dividends. For some REITs, you can get dividend yields of between 3 to 7%, and REITs can be bought and sold like stocks on a public market. So again, these are all different types of properties: office buildings, shopping centers, apartments, single family rentals, office buildings, warehouses, data centers. So if you are interested in this approach, you can consider a REIT index fund. One example is VNQ, Vanguard Real Estate ETF. This provides you with instant diversification. The Fidelity equivalent is FREL, Fidelity MSCI Real Estate ETF, which has low fees. Or you can purchase individual REITs such as Realty Income or American Tower. A little bit higher risk here because it's not a basket, but potentially higher returns. So one sample allocation is 70% in the total stock market index, 20% in an international index, and 10% in a REIT index. So this will give you exposure to both stocks, international markets, and real estate. REITs provide diversification beyond just stocks and bonds. They often perform very differently. They don't always follow the same pattern as the overall stock market, which can actually help you smooth out your returns over time. There's more diversification. And then plus there's also dividend income on top of that, which can be reinvested to accelerate your wealth building. Another approach is what I'm going to call the tax advantaged account strategy. This is a strategy that could potentially save you thousands of dollars in taxes over your lifetime. And a lot of people overlook it when they're deciding how to invest their $10,000. Before you decide what to invest in, you need to decide where to invest in, because the account type matters just as much as the investment choice. By the way, guys, a really good video to watch is my video up top there, where I talk about how to organize your finances in 6 months. And in that video, I break down all of the different investment accounts and the tax strategies behind those accounts. So I recommend you check out that video up top there. So with this tax strategy, let's say you contribute $7,000 a year to your Roth IRA. That's the annual limit in 2025. You get tax-free growth forever. You're not required to withdraw in retirement. It's really, really good for young people in low tax brackets. On the contrary, you have a traditional IRA, which also has a $7,000 annual limit. You get a tax deduction today, and then you pay taxes at retirement. You are required to withdraw at the age of 73. And a traditional IRA is really good for high earners who want a current tax break. You could also opt to put this money in an HSA if you're eligible. There's a $4,300 individual limit as of 2025. With the HSA, there's a triple tax advantage. A, it's tax deductible, so you pay less tax today. B, it grows tax-free. And then C, you can make any tax-free withdrawals if they are used for eligible medical expenses. The HSA can also be used as a retirement account after the age of 65. So the HSA is a really good option if you are someone with a high deductible health plan. If you are following the tax advantaged approach for your $10,000, the first priority that you want to probably set is to max out your employer 401k match first, because you get free money from your employer if they match. And then the second is to max out a Roth IRA, $7,000, and then max out your HSA if you're eligible. And so once you've made the annual contributions to your Roth IRA and your HSA, you want to go back and you max out your 401k, which is $23,500 a year. And then once you've taken advantage of all of your tax advantaged accounts, then you would put any extra money into a taxable investment account. So you always want to make sure that you are maxing out all of your tax advantaged accounts before you put anything into a taxable investment account. So going back to the example previously, if you had $5,000 that went into a Roth IRA invested in index funds, in 30 years, that could be worth $87,000 completely tax-free because it's in a Roth IRA. So the difference between investing in a taxable account versus a Roth IRA could be tens of thousands of dollars over your lifetime in tax. So the government gives us these tax advantaged accounts for you to use to your benefit, so make sure that you use them. And lastly, I want to talk about a balanced approach, which is probably applicable to most people. This is probably what I would recommend for 80% of people that have $10,000 to invest. It's a strategy that basically balances both growth potential with risk management. And this balanced approach has multiple strategies. Let's say that you're 28 years old, you have $10,000 to invest. The first thing you want to do is to make sure your emergency fund is covered and you have enough cash that's liquid to handle day-to-day events and emergencies. And then you would take the remaining amount, so let's say $7,000, which is the annual limit, into your Roth IRA. You can split that $7,000 into, let's say 60% into total stock market index, 20% into an international index such as FTIHX, 10% into a REIT index, and 10% into a bond index such as FXNAX. This works because it's diversified across asset classes and geographies. The risk level is age appropriate. At age 28, your risk tolerance is generally higher. We can allocate 90% of this money towards stocks. It's tax advantage growth because it's in a Roth IRA. It's simple to maintain and rebalance. Here's an example of how you can adjust this based on your age. So if you are younger, you're 20 to 30, and you have a higher risk tolerance, you can go 90% stocks, 10% bonds. If you're between the ages of 30 and 40, 80% stocks, 20% bonds. And if you're between ages 40 to 50, 70% stocks, 30% bonds. And if you're between 50 to 60, 60% stocks, 40% bonds. Because as you get older, you gradually shift from growth to preservation. But even at 60, you still need some stock exposure for inflation protection. Now, we're not trying to hit home runs with this balanced approach. It's just trying to get consistent returns over decades. It's proven it works for the vast majority of investors who want to build wealth steadily over time. So here's what we covered today. Before investing $10,000, make sure you have an emergency fund. For most people, a really simple index fund strategy in a Roth IRA is the best approach. REITs can add real estate exposure without the hassle. Tax advantage accounts can save you thousands of dollars over the years. And a balanced approach combining all of these strategies works for a majority of investors. You also want to consider age as well and your risk tolerance. Here's what I want you to remember though, the best investment strategy is the one that you're actually going to stick to for decades. So whether you choose something like an index fund approach, really simple, or the balanced portfolio, the most important thing is to start investing consistently, start investing today, and let your investments work and your money work for you, because your future self is going to thank you for taking action today. If you love this video today, you're going to love my other video on payday routine. And it's probably one of the first things that we need to set in place and learn if we're trying to be better with our money. So make sure you check out that video up top there. It's one of the most popular videos on my channel. And let me know down in the comments below what questions you have about today's video. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Until next time.